This is an MSViews Now program. You know, for those that don't know me, those that are online, I doubt that there's few on there that don't know me, but my name is Stuart Schlossman. This is sponsored by Genentech, and we thank Genentech. Everybody give a virtual round of applause, all right? Yes, I hear you clapping from home. All right, great. All right, tonight we have Jessica Thomas. Jessica Thomas is a licensed clinical social worker. I told Jessica, please speak for about 35 or 40 minutes, and then we will do Q&A after her presentation. Take it away, Jessica. I'll see you all in 35 or 40 minutes. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Stuart, for that great introduction. I wanted to introduce myself a little bit further so you get to know me a little bit more. My name's Jessica Thomas. I like to share my my professional experience, but also my personal experience too as well. So I've been living with MS for almost 18 years. So I am someone who is a peer as well. Stuart mentioned he is a peer. I am a peer. I'm someone living with MS. But I've also, for almost 17 years, have been working with people as a licensed clinical social worker, specializing with people with neurologic disease primarily, but also chronic disease, terminal disease, and progressive disease. So just want you to know that about me. I am also bringing information to this topic. I have a lot of experience working with within the mental health arena, helping people to find ways to live well with their disease and also ways to manage the emotions of living with MS. And I also have a good bit of experience working with the aging population too. So, and then I like to consider myself as aging because I am in my 40s, and the time that I've been living with MS is continuing to increase as I get older. So tonight's program is kind of a lofty goal, but I have three topics I'm going to bridge together. One is accessing mental health resources. One is on the emotional aspects of growing older with MS. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about family dynamics. Now, when I bridge these topics, I want you to know the MS Mental Wellness Chat is a different program, but if you're interested in the things that I talk about and it appeals to you and you want to learn more, join me on the MS Mental Wellness Chat because I think you'll benefit from it. So we'll move on to our next slide. So I like to start off with this. Why does our mental health matter with MS? And the truth is that for anybody, MS or not MS, moods really play a central part in our life. They also, our emotional state really influences our physical and cognitive functioning. And our quality of life is very much impacted because of our mental health status. So 50% of people with MS experience mood changes. So it's not uncommon if this is something that you experience in your own MS journey. And depression is a primary predictor of quality of life. It's really secondary to any physical disability that one might experience. And mood issues, mental health issues can cause great distress. It can interrupt your family life, work, your social life, etc. Also, mental health diagnosis, while it's diagnosed frequently with MS, it's also underreported with MS because it's one of those invisible symptoms. And it impacts, there's a cyclical of issues with fatigue, cognitive issues, sleep, etc. So I'm going to say too, it's important because addressing our mental health is something that we can do, and addressing and treating mental health is important because it's treatable. So we're going to move on to our next slide here. We're going to talk about the connection of physical and emotional. And so this to me is a very strong relationship. When we are regulating our emotions actually influence our physical health. For example, our stress management, our healthy habits, etc. So if our emotional health is not good, we tend to not engage as much in healthy habits. We might not eat as well. We might not exercise. We might have trouble with feeling positive, etc. And so you can see that emotional affects the physical, but by far, the physical affects the emotional as well. And often when we're experiencing physical symptoms, it's common to have an emotional reaction or response, maybe feeling guilty, feelings of loss, maybe frustration, sadness, etc. And when we have emotional distress and you pair that with a chronic disease, it can lead to feelings and some symptoms of depression and anxiety. So we're going to move on. And this is going to bridge and connect, and you're going to see this. But I'm going to mention family dynamics. I'm not going to stay here super long, but I'm going to talk about it. So relationships have the power to influence our physical and our mental health for the better or for the worse. So if you, and we need balance there. So if we're having a lot of challenges within our family, within our relationships, then we may experience emotional changes that impact our physical health. Lack of social and healthy relationships is often associated with depression or cognitive decline and higher mortality as we age. And fostering healthy relationships is absolutely critical. And so how do we do that? We do that through good communication, through counseling when we need it, and being aware of loneliness and ways to work around loneliness. So some signs of a healthy relationship are respect, trust, good communication, reciprocity, supporting each other in goals, and making decisions together. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So how I'm going to bridge that is, so we see that there's really a connection between our physical and our emotional health and well-being. We also know that if we have an imbalance in our family dynamics or our relationships or a lack of relationships, that can create more emotional distress. And then also that our mental health matters with MS. So it's important to know and to pay attention if you are experiencing some of these signs. So how do we know that we need to access mental health resources? Are you experiencing changes in your personality, eating, or your sleeping patterns? Eating being you're eating too much or not eating enough. Are you struggling with coping? Things that you've been able to do to help cope with stress before you're not able to do? Are you feeling disconnected from people? Are you not wanting to engage in activities that you've engaged in before? Do you have any unusual thinking or extra anxiety? Any mood shifts, anger, hostility? Are you engaging in substances like drinking alcohol to excess? Or are you experiencing apathy, which is just kind of this like lack of desire? If you are experiencing any of those type of symptoms, or if the things that I said resonated with you, I want you to think about, how can I access some mental health resources? Because remember that mental health resources and treating your mental health is one of the things that you can do that would help you to have an overall better quality of life with MS. So when we think about access, we think about talking with your primary care doctor. And the reason why I say this, your primary care doctor and possibly your MS specialist, if your MS specialist is in the community that you live or close to the community that you live, there he or she is going to know probably some really good mental health resources in your area. Your primary care doctor should as well. And so there's not one that's better than the other. Both can address and lead you to the right resources. Also, you can seek guidance through a mental health counselor directly. You can look at Psychology Today. You can contact United Way 211. You can contact the National MS Society. They have what we call MS Partners in Care, specialist MS therapists that are specialized in MS. But the truth is that you don't need a therapist that's specialized in MS. You just need probably a mental health professional that understands a little bit about chronic disease. And so I want, also to kind of reinforce with teletherapy and the increase of accessibility in mental health services, now is a good time to be able to access mental health resources as well. So we're going to move on to our next topic, and that is psychological aspects of aging in general. So when we look at aging, and I'm going to bridge this to MS here in a minute, but when we look at aging and life satisfaction, we see that it increases when we have social connection. And we see the dissatisfaction is when happens often when there is obesity, smoking, drinking to excess, and not being connected with others and not being physically active. So some visible signs when you're thinking about aspects of aging in general is, we often have changes in our physical body. We have changes in our cognition, and this happens naturally with aging. And we also have often changes within our lifestyle. As we age, we have changes with work. Often we have retirement or deciding to leave work. We also have changes in family sometimes. It just, as we age, things change, I guess is the point, is what I'm saying. We also can see in aging that there can be an increase in mental health issues and an increase in depression. So some good indicators of health and wellness for aging is this. So good emotional and social support. This helps really to reduce the risk of mental illness and physical illness. So when we see that there's an increase in mental illness, we see an increase in physical illness. Now, I'm not going to correlate this with MS so much to say, but we do know that if we are dealing with a lot of mental health issues and stress, et cetera, we do see an increase sometimes in our MS symptoms. I'm not saying it's a direct cause, but there is definitely a relationship there. And then when aging, there is something called frequent mental distress. And frequent mental distress is something that we have to pay attention to when we're aging in general. And that's, are we having changes with or interferences with eating well, with exercise, with having a lack of a good diet or sustaining relationships? So you're going to see this theme that I'm talking about with mental health and those kind of components. And often in aging, we can see a late onset of depression. And factors might be changes in marriage, a loss of a spouse, physical illness, low education, a low functional status, and increase in drinking. With that, saying that, it's so important to note that depression is one of the most successfully treated illnesses. And treatment of depression later in life is highly effective. So we're going to move on to the next slide real quick. And now we're going to talk a little bit about emotional aspects of growing older with MS. And so for that, MS adds some challenges to aging, right? With new treatments and new therapies, people with MS are, of course, are living much longer. MS is not a terminal or fatal disease, but MS does cause disability and is progressive. And so we are seeing that, aging is looking a little bit different. When I talked about myself aging with MS, the truth is we're just kind of starting to talk about a lot more what aging with MS looks like. And so I'm kind of part of that cohort too of what it will look like as I aged with MS. And so with the prevalence and the DMTs that are available, those are all helping us to age a little bit more gracefully. But we're still aging, and managing our symptoms and our healthy lifestyle is going to help us to be able to manage aging much better. So we hear this theme about exercise and about socialization and about eating well. And I want to note with exercise that this is really important because exercise for me might look a lot different than exercise for you. And I know for me, exercise in August in North Carolina is different than exercise in January even. And so as we're, kind of exploring some of these healthy lifestyles, these resiliency tips for aging with MS, know that these are things that only, not only help you on a physical level, but they help you on a mental and emotional level, and they help you with MS. So there's a really good connection with how all these things help and help you with your as you age and continue to move forward living with MS too. But when I say exercise, I always like to pause for that minute and talk about that, because I know with MS, there are, physical limitations and disabilities sometimes. Sometimes there is DME that's used. Exercise is going to look different. I do want to plug that MS Views and News has some really good adaptive exercise programs. You can just look on their website to get more information on those. But to continue to expand those resources. So now I want to talk a little bit about a few bright spots to remember. So I think that this is, kind of a really interesting and cool thing to think about. As somebody living with MS and as a professional that has helped many people live well with MS and to kind of navigate living with MS, we have a lot of skills that we can bring to the aging part of our life with MS that we've already been introduced to, perhaps. When I've worked with people in the geriatric population, and even just people that are kind of retirement age, etc., as we age, we deal with a lot of changes, and I had mentioned those. But when you live with an MS diagnosis, you have already started to process, and you have already taken on some of those changes. We know that our health can be challenging sometimes. We know that that we have had, many of us have had to make changes or transitions in our lives. Some of us may have had to redefine purpose. Maybe some people have had to stop working and have had to find other ways to have a very purposeful and meaningful life and redefine what purpose was. That we've had to find our support networks. We've had to learn how to accept using DME and adaptable equipment when your body doesn't quite do what you want it to do. And many people with MS have had to adapt to taking medications for symptom management. And so that's important to know. And also the messaging for how to live well with MS. The things that you have been hearing and listening to mirrors living well as you age with MS. Thinking about resiliency factors, the exercising, the sleeping, the diet, the socialization, the redefining purpose. So I like to share this as like a pause to think, you know what, we're a heads up a little bit. We've got a little bit a heads up on this living well with aging and aging with MS, because we have already had to take on some of these challenges and learn how to adapt and adjust and navigate that some people don't hit until later on in their lives. But you've already been able to bring on some of those skills and that resiliency ahead of time. So just something to think about, and it's the truth. So let's talk about a few tools. What are some resources? What are some tools that can be helpful for you as you are thinking about aging with MS, as you continue? You're always technically aging with MS, but as you're moving forward, one of the tools that I like to mention is schedule and routine. And the reason why schedule and routine is very helpful is because it helps to combat something that happens with MS, and it can happen with mental health issues, and that's called apathy. Apathy is a sense of just kind of lack of motivation, a lack of drive or desire. It can be common with MS. Sometimes it pairs with depression. Sometimes it is just on its own. But apathy isn't a really hard thing to fix, because you can't fix it with medication, but you can absolutely cope with it through having a schedule and a routine. And also having a schedule and a routine keeps us on track, and it allows us to continue to have purpose. And also when we have a schedule and a routine, guess what? We don't have to think about, should I go here? Should I do that? Because if it's a part of your schedule and a part of your routine, it's already integrated into your life. So that is one tool that I think is great and something to consider. If you don't have a routine or a schedule, I challenge you to see if you could put one in your life, and maybe think about making, small things. Don't make it a huge, very structured routine, but maybe have a small schedule of things that you want to do throughout the day. And we know with MS that sometimes we have to adapt or we have to change things, and we can't. Some people are not able to keep up with a very strict routine, and that's okay. But sometimes that structure, with having some mental flexibility, will allow you to have some resilience as you go through. So the second thing I like to mention is purpose. Often we define purpose as our job, what we do, our career, our vocation, etc. Purpose doesn't have to be that. And I think it's important that as we look at purpose, we think about how it doesn't have to quite attach to a job or quite attach to a certain thing. And maybe it's a little bit broader than that. Maybe your purpose can be helping others. Maybe your purpose is bringing a little bit of joy. I think about someone who writes every Friday, does this beautiful, well-written Friday greeting on Facebook. And I that's a part of her purpose, I think, is to help provide insight and just a beautiful message for people as they start the weekend. So thinking about, what is your purpose? And if your purpose used to be what your job was, and you're no longer working or no longer doing that vocation, allowing yourself some mental flexibility to find kind of what your next thing is. What is it that you like to do? What's important to you? What things bring you joy? That's a tool. Knowing what matters to you, what brings you joy, and what you want to do, what is fun, those things are important to know, and they're worthy of calling a tool, because if we know those about ourselves, then that will give us the opportunity to access them. Another tool is learning new things. This is something that's so incredibly important with aging, just in general, but it's so good for MS too, because it allows us to strengthen our cognition. So when we learn a new task, a new skill, a new hobby, a new language, a new game, etc., we are really helping to make some connections for our brain. And that is really healthy for aging, and it's healthy for MS too. And it's good for our mental health, and it's good for our confidence. And sometimes it includes like socialization and other things. So that's a tool to think about. Having a sense of wonder. That is a tool, something to think about, giving yourself, the ability to kind of expand your sense of thought and experiences, allowing yourself to experience something a little bit different. And then also allowing yourself to receive and utilize adaptive resources and tools, because they can empower and help. Sometimes we can look at adaptive equipment, and I know in working with the aging population, I experience this, and working with MS, I experience this too. That sometimes it's hard to want to accept and kind of hold on to adaptive equipment, but utilizing tools that help you to be able to do things that you love or that matter to you or that's fun or that you're interested in, that actually gives you power. It's just changing the way you think about it. And then another tool is staying connected. Now, if you are someone who identifies as being an introvert, guess what? I'm an introvert too. And so I can understand and respect that. And it's important for people that identify as being more introverted, is still being connected to. Loneliness and the feeling of loneliness and being alone is not healthy. Now, that does not mean that you have to engage with people all the time or a lot of people, but having a sense of community or a sense of connection is really important. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about taking a proactive approach to aging. So I'm going to say this because I think it's important. Small changes make big differences. And when I was practicing full-time as a therapist, I do a different job now in patient education, but when I was a therapist, this is something I really honed in on with people I worked with, because sometimes things can feel very overwhelming. And if we're thinking about how to live well with MS, if we're thinking about how to live well and how to strengthen our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, it can be overwhelming to think about implementing changes. So I want to reiterate, small changes make bigger differences. And the reason why is because they're often more sustainable. That's why often on those New Year's resolution days, the first week in January, everybody's going to the gym and they're hitting it hard and they're working out. And then by like 3 weeks later, the gym kind of quiets down. And by like 6 weeks later, the gym's back to just kind of the normal population of people that were signed up before New Year's Eve. So it's important to think about what are some small things that I can integrate into my life that maybe could get me closer to the goals that I would like. So for example, if you would like to build an exercise program or you'd like to start an exercise program and you're feeling intimidated about it, maybe talk to your MS specialist or your primary care provider about making a referral to a physical therapist. And they can help you to find some small things that you can do in your everyday life that can help you to be a little bit more active. Or maybe you can find one fun, active thing to do throughout the week that starts to get you moving a little bit. Because also when we find that we make small changes, we can build off of that. There's something that I've shared in the past, and it's like called the spiral up and the spiral down. We often identify very easily on the spiral down that I've spiraled down, things are really hard and they've been difficult, but we can spiral up in that same way. So when we make small changes, so for example, getting up this morning, if I decided to, I'll do the side by side. If I decided to eat like an egg, some egg whites and a slice of toast, that's going to spiral me up because I'm eating something that's going to help me feel a little bit better. But if I wake up in the morning and I eat a donut, I'm going to feel a little bit bad because I ate the donut, but I'm actually going to feel a little bit guilty about that too. And because I ate that good breakfast, that might that might help make me consider doing, going for like a small walk or sitting out in the sun. I did do that today. I sat out in the sun for about 10 minutes. That was really good for my mental health. Vitamin D, so good for you. And so you can spiral up by making small changes. So I want you to know that. So some resilience tools, and I've mentioned these already, but I'm going to continue to mention them. And if you're struggling with help or how to get help with any of these, I want you to even look at the MS Views and News YouTube channel because there are videos on all of these different topics. So one would be eating well, nutrition. Another one would be exercise programs or exercising. It's a proactive approach to aging. Exercise helps you mentally. It can help with your cognition, and it can help with your with MS, etc. So I'm repeating a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of themes that are worth repeating here. Having a sense of purpose, interacting with others. Now, interacting with others and socialization can be really tricky to integrate. How do you integrate that into your life? One of the tools that I like to share is if depending on your age group, sometimes it's easy to actually have people to naturally interact with. I always say when my son was younger, oh my goodness gracious, so easy to interact with people because I felt I had this built-in social group because of his athletics and sports. Now that he's older, I kind of have lost a little bit of that group, and I've since have joined Rotary. And joining Rotary has helped me some because it's connecting me to people and it's giving me service projects, etc. Also, when I've worked with people that are older than me, we've talked about the senior center and other groups, or even looking at your arts council, looking at your rec centers, etc. There are a lot of opportunities to meet people, and sometimes the hardest thing is actually just going through the front door and being new once or twice and trying to make those connections. But ultimately, that socialization can be helpful for you. And so as you're thinking about taking on a proactive approach to aging, the most important message here is that small changes make big differences and that you can spiral up from those changes. It's so easy to, know that we can spiral down, but you can actually spiral up, and all those changes can help you with aging, but also just living well with MS. And no matter if you're 20 years old on this call or if you are 60 or older. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And one more time, I'd repeated that slide. So I'm going to bring Stuart back here. I kept us at almost right at 30 minutes. I timed myself, but I would love to answer any questions that you have about family dynamics, about accessing mental health resources, about aging with MS, about mental health and aging and mental health, etc. I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an awesome program, and I was getting chuckles from some of it, I'm sorry to say, but only because I just moved to another area. I'm 64 years old. Trying to find people my age, okay, that are going to do something new or be able to accept me and my quirkiness for everything that I do and like to commandeer a room and et cetera. I'm like, yeah, right. These people are in trouble. And I'm listening to you saying, like go to a senior center. Yeah, right. I'm not ready for that. All right. And or get involved with other groups, which I can do. But again, I'm never into canasta. I've never been, but I might have to be. Might actually have to learn how to play a new game of cards to do this. Or who knows? Oh my God, do I have to learn how to play shuffleboard? Wow, that's going to be a real turner. All right. I can't run, so I can't play tennis. So, we'll do away with that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And so, I'm listening to your aging with MS and the achy bones and everything else that I feel. And I don't know if anybody agrees with everything I just said, but if you do, raise your hand. I want to hear your questions. I want to see your responses. I mean, we've got to have some questions for Jessica and make this an even better event. Okay. I see one from Jean. She writes, I'd like to take a piece of wood, burn it, and put flowers on it. What is that going to do for you? But I'll let you answer that.
Okay. So she would like to take a piece of wood, burn it, and put flowers on it?
She would like to get a piece of wood, burn it, and put flowers on it. Yes.
Okay. So, Jean, I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more about that. That would help me a little bit. But I think that here, because that may be a craft, I don't know. But the truth is, and actually I'm going to respond to Stuart. So one of the things I've learned about tennis, people that love tennis, is pickleball is like the new tennis.
No way.
Okay, well, I've been hearing a lot about that, and one day I'm going to learn how to play pickleball. But it's so easy. It's so easy to knock out. I couldn't do this. I don't want to do that. That's not my group. That's not this. I kind of felt like that about joining Rotary. It's an older group than I am. It's different. It's mostly men. It's mostly a lot of different things. But we sometimes the being brave is just reaching out, trying new things, and giving yourself the ability to just experience, and then you get to decide if that wasn't a good fit or not.
Right. So let's go to another question that somebody has, and it's two-part because different people are asking. So one is asking how to get one's significant other more interested in their MS, and another person is writing, how do they get their elder parents to get them more interested in their MS?
Okay. So how do you get your family members more interested in your MS? You cannot force that, right? But what you can do is that you can invite people to show up to attend programs like this, to learn a little bit more. You can share information. One thing I think is a win is that when you have the opportunity, and I know this is a remote program right now, but it's some of the in-person programs that are done is bring your partner, so they can actually be beside another person, another spouse, another partner, because they're when that connection is made, sometimes that can be helpful. I think there's also a layer of communication, right? Being able to talk with your loved one and telling them that you need them to be involved, or how you're feeling, being able to express that is important. I think it begins with communication, and then kind of assessing how much their lack of interaction into your MS world is, how much it's impacting you and your relationship. But it starts with good communication. If you're struggling with communicating that, I think the therapy is a good avenue, because that gives you a safe ground to talk about it. But I do think when you get the opportunity to go to a live program one day again, and bring your partner, try to encourage your family, your elderly parents to come, that gives them the opportunity to learn a little bit more in a different setting.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to call out some people because I want to hear some questions from them. We have a person from the Bahamas. We have a couple of people from Canada online. I see people from all across the United States and one from the United Kingdom. Well, for the person in the United Kingdom, I'm sorry you haven't gone to bed yet, all right? But, for everybody else, you should be wide awake and asking questions. So, don't wait for somebody else to ask a question that you think might be answered for you. Ask your own question. I will not say your name, okay? Kevin, though. Kevin, yeah, Kevin. I said Kevin because he can take it. Kevin writes that Stuart would be a good gin rummy player. I probably would, but I like poker better. So I like poker because I just joke around all the time, so they don't know if I'm BSing or not. All right, so that's a good way, and I can keep a poker face just by joking around. All right, Kevin, I'm ready for you at any time. All right, next person. Person writes, I have my husband to get flat wood for me. I guess I asked my husband to get flat wood for me. I have to burn that wood. Have a burner that burn that wood. I still don't understand. Can you ask again? Are you getting this now?
I kind of think I'm understanding this a little bit. So it sounds like her partner is really helpful. It sounds like she likes to do something like some sort of craft or something that's meaningful. It gives her purpose. This is my guess, and that and that her partner is very helpful, and that she is able to engage in this. And this is something that keeps her active and engaged, and that's something that she enjoys. That is going to be my guess. If I have that totally wrong, please let me know. But but it's something that I think that she enjoys.
Great, fabulous. And again, everybody, I'm not going to say your name unless you're Kevin, all right? Because Kevin, I know, can take it, all right? But unless Kevin's asking a question, then I'm not going to say his name. But if he just makes a comment, I'll say his name. All right, so the next person, the person that was just writing the thing about the wood wrote back and wrote, it's crafty.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, and that allows you, and when we're creative, we tend to feel better, and that's something that can give us, endorphins and feel good as when we're creating as well. So that's great.
Okay, awesome. All right, so the next person is writing. I got a few people writing now, so I don't think that I feel particularly depressed or anxious, but I don't seem to get anything done. And even when I start trying to make a routine, it lasts for maybe a week. Is that its one own kind of mental or emotional disorder? Guys, I'm not misreading. That's what I'm reading.
Okay. So what I would say is that falls in kind of the category of apathy, right? Apathy is when, you struggle with lack of motivation. It's not necessarily anxiety or depression, but really struggle to just kind of have a desire to do things. Routine and schedules are really hard, and it can take a very long time to master that. I think about, we get in the car and we put our safety belt on, but it took us a long time to get to that point to where we automatically do that. One of the things that I do mention I've mentioned to people I've worked with in the past is, if you're struggling with routine and schedule, that to think about it like you get to start over each day. I'm not going to open my planner, but I use a planner every single day, and I think I start over each day. And how I do that is I have a general kind of flow of things that I need to do, that I want to do. But then if there is a deviation in that, I do not knock myself down or beat myself up. I do something different. And this is something that flips the switch for many people. Write down the things that you did. Instead of your to-do list, do an I did list. And so when I start to feel defeated by that routine, because I couldn't follow it for one reason or another, and sometimes that reason is flat out fatigue, then I will write in what I did do. And it could be the smallest of tasks, but then that can help. And then just remember, you can start over tomorrow.
Right. Thank you. You know, somebody spoke to me the other day, and somebody gave me a picture, which I put on my Facebook page earlier, that said that they felt so accomplished the other day. They got everything done, all their tasks done. But then today they get up and they can't move. They can barely get out of bed. And, you know, and that happens with me as well. Everybody thinks I'm so energetic. And, you know, sometimes I have a task list of many things to do. And the people that work with me say, Stuart, what are you up to? I said, well, I'm still trying to get past number one. You know, it's difficult. All right. And a lot of us have this problem. But what do you say to a person, though, that is having problems getting past the first thing that they wanted to do in the day?
So if you're struggling with the first thing that you want to do in the day, I think that's important to not stare at the fourth and fifth and sixth thing that you need to do or that you thought you wanted to do. I think at that point, it's time to give yourself grace and give yourself permission that that each day looks a little bit different. You know, sometimes I think it would be good if we wrote a little card to ourselves for those days, a little note card to ourselves, and to give ourselves advice, because on the good days, they're really good. We can knock it out of the park, right? But then on the bad days, it's hard to manage because sometimes the bad day is so much polar opposite than that good day. But reminding yourself that you will have another good day again. When you're looking at your to-do list, you don't need to look at the, you know, items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, if you were stuck at one and one is where you're stuck, then it is the day to give yourself grace, allow yourself to be at one, and to be gentle with yourself. Because if you beat yourself up, all that you're doing is that you're causing more emotional distress, which is going to cause more stress. And if you feel bad and guilty and ruminate over that, chances are you're not going to sleep as well. And it's going to make the reset harder for the next day.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to bypass a few. I'm going to get back to you all later on. But there's a question here from a gentleman who I spoke with the other day who's newly diagnosed. And I want to get to his question now. And so you can answer this. This is very important. Since I'm new to this, how is it the best way to talk to others, that other people about this with people that aren't in your family?
Okay. So how to being newly diagnosed is really hard, and having that conversation with other people, kind of, you know, where you're kind of deciding, how much do I want to tell? Do I want to tell? How can I explain this where they'll understand? You know, I think it's important to one, kind of know, like, this very simple fact is you can never untell. And that's important. You know, you can never untell, but I don't want to give you fear on telling either. I think as you continue to educate yourself and get more comfortable with your diagnosis, you're going to be able to find ways to learn how to respond to people. You're going to see the variety of responses when you talk to people that are not your family members. Like, I told someone I had MS the other day, and it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, and I'm, you know, many, almost 2 decades into this journey, and we don't need to be sorry for me. But that's a general response that sometimes you can get. So it's, I think the more you educate yourself, the more you kind of decide what you want to share, what you don't want to share, who you want to share with, who you don't. And being gentle with yourself as you talk to them, and you'll learn kind of how to do this. This is one of the most challenging parts, I think, of being newly diagnosed, is one, living with it, but then also starting to talk about it. And it can also be very empowering to talk about. And because this is the next step in your journey, is figuring out how to live well with your disease, and that it's not you, it's just a part of you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. All right, next person's writing, how to make personal connections with COVID. Zooms don't always work. Zooms don't always work.
Yeah, tell me about it. So how to make personal connections during COVID. We are seeing, our comfort levels are different from one person to the next. We are also seeing that, that COVID precautions come, they just, they kind of waver quite a bit. The good thing is that during COVID, the world became a lot more accessible. And yes, Zoom does not always work, but one of the things that we can do is become a little bit more knowledgeable on how to use Zoom, how to use those technologies, but then also find, are there other avenues that we can connect with others? And it really is about your comfort zone. I am comfortable going to a Rotary meeting now. I am comfortable going out and going and participating in a service project. If I am fearful of COVID, or I'm fearful I might get sick, or I'm feeling like allergies or sinuses, and I don't want to impact it, I'm going to wear a mask or not go out. But I think it's kind of negotiating what, one is finding kind of what's out there. There was a whole program I did a while back on accessing resources during COVID. And I don't remember the name of it, but it was really good. And we talked about art stuff. We talked about all sorts of different things that you could do and engage in during COVID. And just remember, Zoom doesn't always work, but it sure is more helpful than it's ever been in terms of connecting. I encourage you to maybe connect with support groups, find what you like, find what you're interested in, and see how accessible it can be.
Thank you. There are many support groups, everybody should know, that are around the country that have gotten back into live, in-person support, all right? Doing what they did prior to COVID's appearance in the U.S. And you should contact those support group leaders and see how they're doing it, and see if you can get back into a face-to-face dialogue with people. That also is extremely important. And for those, sorry to keep going, but for those that want to see other talks of Jessica's that she's done with us, referring to something that she did recently, I'm pretty sure she did that on one of our programs, but you could go to our YouTube channel, which is accessible from our website. And if you don't know how to go there by now, I don't know what to tell you, but it's www.ms as in Sam, V as in Victor, N as in Nancy.org. All right. And you'll click on the link on the left side of the page that takes you to the YouTube channel, and just type in the search box, Jessica. She's the only one. She's the only Jessica. Okay. All right. You wanted to say something.
You can't really replace face-to-face communication and interaction, and there is something beautiful and important about that. If you can find ways to interact with small people, like a small amount of people, or in a safe setting, et cetera, I encourage you as much as you can and in a way that's healthy. Zoom does continue to help to connect us, but when you can face-to-face, I think it's the most beneficial.
That's right, everybody. You can't just see me online. I look better in person, okay? All right, great. All right, next we have a person that's saying, I was diagnosed with my MS, 25, now I am 68. I have trouble with what symptoms are they caused by the aging? I think you can answer that.
Yeah, I can, because I think we get to a certain point with MS, and I think I'll get here too, that all of a sudden I'll realize, is that MS or is that aging, right? Actually, I had a MRI and of my spine, and I forget exactly the language of it, but I remember asking my doctor, is that aging or is that MS? And he said it was aging. So it's hard to decipher between the two. But one of the things that you got from that, hopefully from my presentation, is it might have sounded repetitive, but the truth is that's a positive, because like a lot of things are repetitive in terms of wellness for MS and for aging. So it doesn't quite answer, and it can make it a little bit maddening. But I know as a therapist who's worked with people without MS that are aging, and people worked with people that are aging with MS, and just people with MS that are young, the themes are kind of the same.
So there are a lot of times people ask me, don't you have symptoms of MS? I said, I have no idea if it's MS or aging, all right? It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. I have it. I'll deal with it. I live with it. And I live with it to the point where I'm still traveling 3 to 4 times a month doing these educational programs around the United States. And, what gives me the power to do it is knowing that we need to be there to provide this information. So, everybody has to find their own way of how to get out and do things. And whether it's your age or your MS, just deal with it and get on with it, because when it stops, it's going to stop. Okay.
And remembering that, that when the thing that I talked about, like the just that pause and all this things that, while we don't want to say that MS gives us gifts, but there's things that we've gotten, like we learn to adapt a little bit more. We understand the ups and downs. And so there's skills and things that you've already learned through your MS journey that will help you as you're aging as well.
Okay, thank you. Next one. At what age should we go for our first neuropsych exam or evaluation?
So, this, I don't think there's a specific age, to be honest. Some people can say that it's good to have a baseline neuropsych testing at a certain point. I think it's important to go when you're recognizing that you're having some challenges, because neuropsych testing can identify areas of cognitive challenges. The most difficult thing is that often we have testing, but we don't have the rehabilitation to go along with it, and the skills and et cetera. But there's no specific age. It's different for different disease groups. Stuart, if you know anything different than what I'm saying, please chime in, because you probably have heard. But to me, there's no specific age.
I think that you're correct. There's no specific age, but a lot of people do this at the onset of being diagnosed, just to start a biomarker. And the better neurologists will actually encourage you to get that. So that way they do have a biomarker. So that way they have a marker. They know what you are when you got started, all right? And maybe 5 or 10 years in, they'll ask you to do it again. Only if they see you having cognitive decline will they ask you to do it again, so they could get a new baseline and see where there have been changes. Okay? Yeah. So as the future goes on, though, everybody, I've been learning a lot about artificial intelligence lately, and oh my gosh, the world is going to start spinning soon for all of you, because soon they're going to be doing MRIs where there's going to be this artificial intelligence technology taking place, and the doctors are going to see not just 3D images, but they're going to see 3D images with color patterns, so they can see where the worsening is actually happening, and the color patterning getting more colorful if the lesions are worsening, or if the lesions are not worsening, but yet there's like cognitive problems happening that are getting stronger and stronger. So they're going to be able to see all these things. And what does that mean? It means that the doctors are going to be able to treat you better. That's what it means. Okay, next person. I'm doing a lot of jabbering tonight, aren't I? I live in a rural area and resources are hard to access. Any suggestions?
Absolutely. So if you live in a rural area, one of the recommendations that I mentioned is primary care. Your primary care doctor, I think, is going to be a gateway to what is in your local resources. Now, I also want to say you live in a rural area. Guess what? With COVID, the presence of teletherapy, there's been really an expansion of resources because of COVID, and mental health being kind of one of those. So if you are needing to access resources, I encourage you to start with your primary care provider, because they're going to know your local people, your local mental health professionals. They should know. Your MS specialist should know. But if you're in rural, your MS specialist might not be in your community, and you want to start with your community. What's in your community? And then beyond that, you can look at teletherapy resources. If I was looking for someone in a rural area, I would look at Psychology Today. I would look at what other teletherapy options there are for the state that you live in. My
turn. Okay, the internet. The internet has great resources for you. If you're in a rural area and if you have internet and you're in this rural area, well, the internet is there for you, okay? And, this is something that MS Views and News excels in. We provide our programs in rural American underserved communities. And, that's the key thing, is teaching people what websites they can go to for excellent resources. So I was about to say your name, but I'm not going to say your name. If you want to know more about this, please write to me, and I'll give you a lot of the websites that you can access for information? Just tell me what it is that you're looking for. Okay.
And there's also a past program I did with MS Views and News during COVID about accessing mental health resources in your community that focused on specifically on how to navigate, and we talk about role in that presentation as well.
Great, thank you. A person writes, and it's not a question, but it's a great suggestion, so I'm gonna say it. It sounds like that journaling is a good idea. So she said it. That's as far as I'm going to get with that. But would you like to expand upon that?
Yeah, journaling is incredibly healthy. One, I think it can be good for us for expression of emotion, getting things out, being able to just let go of things for the day. So from a mental health perspective, it is beautiful. It's also a very kind of nice way to kind of catalog your day and your life, etc. And so journaling, it can be a way to express. It can also be a way of a routine of a way of decompressing, etc. Journaling can be very helpful.
Thank you for that. Next, a person writes, just like we have MS-specific physical therapists such as Gretchen Hawley, how important is it that we try to find MS-specific therapists and mental health specialists?
It would be great, but there are not an abundance of them. So that's why I try to not over promote that you have to see an MS specialist for mental health. If you can, that is beautiful. But what I'm going to tell you is that there is a lot of crossover in chronic disease and MS and progressive disease and MS. And a lot of therapists are very specialized in helping if they have an understanding of chronic disease, or they've worked with aging, sometimes that fares very well, or they've worked with loss and grief, there is going to be a carryover of just psychological themes that they're going to be able to help with. I think the most important thing is that you have a therapist that you can trust, that is interested in understanding how MS affects you and wants to learn a little bit about it. But beyond that, they're going to have the skills to help you navigate the loss and grief, the uncertainty of it sometimes, how to talk and communicate, etc. So I encourage you, when you're interviewing a therapist, to ask, do you have experience working with people with chronic disease or progressive disease or loss and grief? And that's going to carry you over far more than trying to find the unicorn of someone who just really understands MS.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm only chuckling because of the next question, and it's a good thing I'm reading it because I can't hear you to if you said it to me. The question is, how is MS affecting hearing?
How is MS affecting hearing? From what I understand is that MS can affect your hearing literally. I also think that with MS, I'm going to go a little bit literal here, that it can affect, cognition, which can affect kind of our processing level, understanding what we're taking in, etc. And so MS can impact kind of both areas. If you are struggling, let me talk about this real quick. This is important. Hearing and aging, I'm going to put these together. Hearing and aging are two things that we notice that as we age, our hearing changes. And so this is MS aside, but MS could be a part of this. When we don't hear well, we tend to not engage. And when we don't engage, then that kind of robs us from the experience of being connected. And it also robs us from conversations, which is one of the, if we're looking at dementia and other things, we're not going to talk about that today, but that's really important. So if you're having problems with hearing, I encourage you to talk to your primary care doctor and your MS specialist to see what is attributing to it and how you can fix it. And if you can wear hearing aids to help alleviate it, goodness gracious, wear your hearing aids. If it's a processing thing, talk to your MS specialist about it as well. Stuart, do you have any insight?
I didn't hear you. All right. No, I don't have any insight. What you said was excellent, and I want to go on to the next one. What is great is that when I first started the Q&A, there was one question, and I put out the call to the wild, and we've got so many, it's incredible. So, all All right. So one person is writing, well, Stuart, Stuart. My friend is not able to make this meeting and is very good information for someone who is fairly new to the MS Toolbox. I'm reading this all, everybody, because this is important. Will this be on YouTube? Of course it's going to be on YouTube. Everything we do is on YouTube, and it goes on to our YouTube channel, which is found on YouTube. All right, just go to YouTube and look up MS Views and News, and you'll find everything that you want that we've done in the past. But the only problem is that it's going to take about 30 days to get this onto YouTube because, again, we're doing 10 plus programs per month, and everything is video recorded. And it takes time for us to go through these and get them onto the website or onto the YouTube channel. So, I do say 30 days. Sometimes it's 40. I'm sorry for that. Other times it's 20, and that's great, okay? But yes, it'll be there. So that's all I can say about that. Thank you. All right, next person's writing, how about struggling to get out of bed?
Yeah, that can be two different things. If it is depression related, where you're struggling to get out of bed because your mood is low, it is hard to get out, it is hard to get going, etc. The one of the things that can help that is some level of that routine, that structure, finding small routine maybe, and I want to go from that spiral up. There's this really good book on it's called Spiraling Up, helping depression one step at a time. I didn't get the name quite right, but the basis behind it is that when you do one small thing, you build from that. So maybe your goal, instead of that you're going to everything when you're depressed feels huge. So you want to break it down into micro steps. So maybe instead of having a lot of pressure about getting out and getting in the shower, maybe your the goal is to get onto sitting on the couch or changing your clothes when you get out. Finding a small thing also to look forward to can be helpful. It's hard when we're depressed to have things to look forward to, or having things that have accountability. It can help too. If you're if you're going to coffee, or if you have something that you're planned, that can help a little bit as well. If you are struggling with depression, I want you to contact your doctor, please. Your primary care doctor or your MS specialist. I want to reiterate, MS can be so invisible in terms of mental health. I have this iceberg slide that I use, and I always say that, these feelings can be underreported. Your neurologist can't see if you're having trouble getting out of bed. You need to tell them you're having trouble getting out of your bed. And the reason is between mental health, behavioral activation, or counseling, or medications, you can get treatment that will help. When your quality of life is overtaken by sadness or depression, it impacts your whole life, and it will impact your experience with MS as well. And so, and it's treatable, and there are people that care. So if you are struggling with getting out of the bed, I urge you to call your doctor tomorrow and just start the conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. All right. Next person writes, and I basically answered he or her already, but I want you to do it as well, please. The bottom line is that they don't know if they should go for the cognitive testing because it takes 3 hours and it seems exhausting. And I said yes to do it. The bottom line is, though, is that they want you to get tired, or they want you to be yourself. If you're getting exhausted, they want to see how you're reacting when you're like that. So that's my viewpoint. Now I'm going to give it to Jessica.
So I used to work in a neurology practice, and one of my friends, my colleagues, was the person who did the testing for cognitive testing. And then I worked really closely with the neuropsychologist as well. And I have a really good friend who's a neuropsychologist. And so with all that said, I've had conversations about that, because it can feel intimidating for people to go in and get testing, and 3 hours feels very long. But the truth is it's not a stress test to wear you out. It's to understand your fitness level or understand where you are. And what I do like about it is the right neuropsych testing or what you can get from it is not always just about deficits, but they find your strengths, what you do good at. And we can build from those. And so kind of looking at it like, and this may seem too rainbow and gumdrops here, but I'm just going to throw it out as looking at it like, I wonder the areas that I'm going to be stronger in. And I wonder, we're going to find out, areas that you might be able to, that you have challenges with. As I would find out the same if I had testing done too. And so, but thinking about what are the areas that I am strong in and how can I build off of that? So it's, I think the most important things is that you have a good night's sleep, that you go into the testing not feeling super stressed out, and that you allow it to just to be sort of like it's just like just understanding where you are, and that's not a bad thing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Next, I have a journal that I tend to write every day, but I only seem to be able to manage to write one sentence or one or two every other 2 to 3 days. How do I get more consistent?
My goodness, what you're doing is good. I want you to applaud yourself. So you're writing one sentence every day almost. That's great. You don't. What do you need to get from it? I think is, I don't journal, but in my planner, I write one thing I'm grateful for. It's finding, are you getting your needs met out of that? Now, if you're feeling like you need to really, to express emotions and you want and have a desire to want to write more, then I'd maybe change the time of day that you're writing. I know if I try to write in the evening before bed, forget it. I am like toast when it's bedtime. And so cognitively, I'm not going to be able to do it. But if I journal the next morning on my day, or if I journaled like at the end of the workday, technically, I probably would have more to contribute to it. So I think if you want to write more, you can also do a habit tracker and, find other ways, but I want you to applaud yourself because most people don't journal and build from the strengths of the things that you are doing.
Great, thank you. Person writes, I was diagnosed with MS at 25, now 68. I'm also confused to know how much to exercise and when not to get so tired to do other things. I'm also confused, what is MS symptoms to aging symptoms?
Okay. So knowing the right type of exercise. Well, of course, I can't answer that for you. When I'm not in front of you and I'm not an exercise specialist. But what I would recommend is that you talk with your doctor. You make an appointment with a physical therapist if you're new to starting an exercise plan, or join a Silver Sneakers program, et cetera. Find out what type of exercise is good for you and what type of exercise you like, because if you don't like it, you're probably not going to do it. And finding out and paying attention to your body, like if we don't want to burn ourselves out so much that we don't have energy for our day, but I think by doing some of those active things, by connecting with a physical therapist, et cetera, or Silver Sneakers, et cetera, finding out what the right exercise is for you, and then kind of listening to your body is going to help. And then to answer the aging and MS question, like Stuart, I think explained that very well. It's kind of hard to know, like at a certain point, when you've had MS for 25 years and you're in your 60s, you start to kind of, the symptoms are going to cross over. And it's going to be hard sometimes to know what's aging and sometimes hard to know what MS is. But because you've been living with MS for such a long time, how to take care of those symptoms and how to manage and how to balance your life out and how to be patient with yourself. Apply those tools to aging.
Okay, thank you. Next, a person writes, I'm a speech language pathologist, and if you feel you have hearing loss, see an audiologist. You might have a free hearing screening in a local college. Call and ask for the speech language department and ask about what they can offer or about what they can, sorry, I got to the bottom of my screen here, I can't see, or what other local resources there might be. Thank you. Thank you for providing that information.
That is great. And one thing I wanted just to spin off of that as well is, as I know this from working with Parkinson's, that speech therapists actually can be very helpful with cognitive help too sometimes. And so I don't want to oversell this, but if you are struggling some with cognition, speech therapy sometimes is an avenue to help us, because they tend to be very good with helping with some cognitive challenges with them, with disease.
Great, thank you. So a person writes, great job as always. I can't believe this is the first time I'm having the privilege to hear Jessica. And I don't know how you've missed it, because you're on a lot of our programs. I've seen you on a lot of our programs, and I can't believe that you've missed Jessica all this time. She's probably done way more than 100 programs for us in the last 3 years. So
it's been a lot.
That would be difficult. Yeah, it's been a lot. Yes. So thank you for that.
Thank you. If you want to see more of me, the monthly mental wellness chat is incredible. And if you are lacking connection, I highly advise to participate in that mental wellness chat, because the one bit of feedback I get back every single month is, thank you, I don't feel alone. It's incredible. So that's just an avenue of connection too.
Thank you. What do you do for people that are newly diagnosed, that are reading a lot about MS and they start feeling those symptoms?
Okay. So, when you're newly diagnosed, this is how I describe it. So when you in MS, or any disease even, I think there's like chapter books, if that makes sense, of disease progression. And when you're newly diagnosed, I think it's important, to know what chapter 100, might be. But I think it's really important, as you educate yourself, to do it in a way that kind of keeps you kind of where you are in your diagnosis, if that makes sense. I think it's important to not overwhelm yourself, and also to kind of, educate yourself in a slow and intentional way. Now, if you are, I'm going to be very literal to your question too, because I'm a literal person. If you're reading, things about MS and you're starting to experience them too, then talk to your doctor about it, if your symptoms, etc. But if from a more of a, one of the things I would do with patients that were newly diagnosed is that we really came across and came up with a plan of how to educate ourselves on MS. So that way it wasn't overwhelming, because if you're stuck in chapter 75 through 100, but you're really living in chapter 2, that you're not really being fair to yourself, because you're in a different spot than what you're reading. Is it okay to understand what 100 is? Absolutely. I know what 100 is too. But the truth is that we want to make sure that we're reading and educating ourselves in a way that's appropriate to the disease that we're living at the time that we're living.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. What about the anti-placebo effect? For those that are feeling things that really aren't there, and they're like ingesting them, thinking that it must be part of their life, and then they're feeling worse.
So when you're I guess taking in information and then you're starting to feel like you're experiencing it, it's making you feel worse. And I think it's important to kind of like deviate. What we pay attention to is what we fuel. So one, I would talk to your doctor about it, because I think that's helpful, because sometimes our doctors can be very grounding about where our lesions are, what we should be experiencing, where we are, et cetera. But then also it might be helpful to talk with other people that, that are living with MS and doing other things, finding a refocus, because sometimes when we overinvest in things, then if we're only paying attention to these things, then what's going to happen is that's all of our focus. But if we're finding other things to focus on, that will help us to kind of change what we're experiencing. But if you think you're experiencing something, talk with your doctor about it. And if you realize that you're having kind of a placebo effect, talk with your doctor about it. But also find healthy ways to get MS information and education. Find healthy people to be around, and find interests in other things too, because that will help you to kind of expand what you're looking at instead of just looking at MS stuff.
Jessica, as always, a pleasure having you here. Have a great night, everybody. I'm signing off. Ciao.